This is the More to Life Than Money podcast. Real people, real stories, real conversations about wealth and abundance with your host, JW Rayhans.
Welcome, everybody. It is going to be a lot of fun in this episode, and I am jazzed about the guest that we have with us today. And this is a woman who you're going to see, she's got a fire in her. She's lived a life, and there's so many great lessons that any of us are going to be able to learn from Annmarie, and you're going to see that very early on in our conversation. It's going to light right up. So be ready for some fun, be ready to strap in, and be ready to just take some notes and really think about how you're going to apply some of the things that have happened and gone on in Annmarie's life, that you can see where there's an application in your own life. So Annmarie, thank you for being here. It is going to be such a joy just to be able to spend some time with you, have a conversation with you. And even just in our time of getting to know each other, I can tell this is going to be a blast. So awesome. Thank you for spending some time with me this morning.
Very welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're going to jump right in. So I hope all of you are ready. This is going to be almost like you just got in the cockpit of an F-16 and you better be ready for flight, because that's where we're going. And Annmarie, you mentioned something, even as you and I were chatting, that is not normal for most people. It's a bit unique, and that actually there's a lot about your life that is unique. And so,
try to say I'm not normal?
No, and I don't think you want to be.
I don't.
I don't think you want to be.
Not my goal.
Yeah. And so let's just start with the journey of life, because you've had a lot of changes throughout life. You've moved around a lot, started some things early in life, still experiencing some great things in life. You've got a milestone birthday that's coming up, but all this has been a lot. And so let's start with this. How does somebody do what you do? In other words, how does somebody get through life the way you've gotten through life? And I'm going to let you share some details in that, but we're going to expand on some of those details too. So how does somebody get through a life like what you've had?
You know, that's a great question. I think when I look back, one of the things that always comes to mind is, you know, my dad had a couple sayings. One of them is, if you don't have time to do it right, when do you have time to do it over? And I can't tell you how many times that goes through my mind. And I also think that you just have to work hard and find opportunities. You know, he was a lifer in the Air Force, very strict, but taught me an amazing work ethic. So even though I started work when I was 14, I was getting compliments right off the bat for, you know, finishing when I started and doing it right the first time and showing up when I was supposed to be there. And like, you can always be early, you can never be late, you know, kind of thing. And I've had some amazing mentors along the way, like every company I've worked for. When I graduated from high school, I knew I was not college material, but I did attempt to go to community college for one semester, and I took one class. And one of the examples the lady gave, it was a women's business class, and she just said, you know, always picture yourself with one hand in front to grab onto what those in front of you know, and then one hand behind you to help the next one along.
There you go.
And man, that has stuck with me my whole life. It's not only women, but just, you know, helping. I've been very fortunate having people help me along the way in a million different ways. And then I've always tried to give back and help anybody that I can. You know, Zig Ziglar says you can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
And that is my tagline.
Yeah, you found that to be true, haven't you?
I very much found that to be true.
See, I told you all, you better be ready, because there you go. You've got multiple nuggets. You're going to have to rewind this thing back about 2 minutes just to catch all the great stuff that was right there, Annmarie, that you just shared with us off the bat, even starting with some of those lessons that your dad instilled in you right off the bat that seem like simple things, but they really are a competitive edge. And sometimes those of us that just practice, you know, doing what you say you're going to do, or just practice hard work, or just practice showing up, or just practice, you know, if you're not going to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it at all? Like, these seem like simple things, but when you practice those on a regular basis, they really do kind of give you a competitive edge. They set you apart. And it's not like it's supposed to be that way. Those things probably shouldn't necessarily set us apart, but they do, don't they?
They really do. And I think that without realizing it then, just by doing what was instilled in me and just his voice in my head thinking like, do it right, whether I was, bagging groceries or getting carts off the lot, like, take 30 seconds, go get that one that's the furthest one away, even though it's 120 degrees outside, and just do it. And people notice. And I think that, and I didn't realize it then, but now it really has got me a seat at the table that I needed to be at from just a super young age. But again, great mentors. Retail's been, brutal in some ways. It's, every night, all weekends, you're not, spending holidays with your family, but so many lessons, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that a little bit because you've had a professional journey that's quite fascinating as well. But even there, I want to mention just the fact that you noticed later on that people were noticing you. And we don't always see that in the moment, right? We don't always know when someone's paying attention, but it's a good reminder for all of us to remember people are watching. And when those things, when they see those nuggets, when they see those differentiators in you, they do notice, they do pay attention. And sometimes the invite for an opportunity comes later on because they've seen that in you over and over. They've noticed that's a part of who you are. And so we all can learn from that, of realizing people are watching. And when they see something that's unique, that they want a part of, or they want to provide you an opportunity, they can become that mentor that maybe you didn't even realize was there.
Yeah.
Let's dive into retail.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because retail can be crazy.
Retail can be crazy, but very rewarding.
Absolutely. So tell us about that.
I started at a local grocery store, Kroger, Fry's here locally. When I was 14, I lied about my age and said I was 16. And so as people were getting promoted, because they really were 18, to be like cashiers and stockers, my boss figured out pretty quick, like, something's going wrong. You should be graduating with everybody, but really you're a freshman, like we're a sophomore, what's happening? So anyway, I came clean with her and told her, and she ended up being one of the first mentors I had, and amazing. So I worked there for almost 4 years, and in the meantime, I moved out when I was 15 and for a million reasons, and talked to her about it, and she just was amazing. She's like, her husband traveled a lot for work. He was a pilot in California mostly. And so she would schedule me to babysit when she needed me to babysit. She would schedule me at Fry's when she needed me at Fry's, and she took me to school every day because I wasn't old enough to drive yet.
Wow.
And she made it super clear, like the day you quit school, because I just really wanted to quit and just work full time and make money and pay rent. And she said, the day you quit school, you're fired and you can't babysit for me, and I doubt we'll be friends. And so, and the fact that, again, she, took me in, drove me to school every day. I mean, that was, that one made a big deposit in my memory bank.
She drew a line for you.
She drew a line. I still talk to her today. She lives in Oklahoma now, and we're still great friends.
You willing to share her first name?
Yeah, Sue.
Sue.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
My first mentor.
Sue, if you're listening, thank you.
Yeah, she's amazing. I tell her every day. And so then I got a little frustrated at the ripe age of 17 and literally walked out of Fry's one day and without giving notice or anything, which was crazy. And so I just started driving knowing like I cannot, like my dad had just co-signed for a car, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot tell him I quit my job. And so I just started driving, and I got all the way to Phoenix and saw an orange piece of plywood that said now hiring. And I thought it was called Home Depot, but turned out it was Home Depot, and the store was getting ready to open, and it was the 12th store in the company.
Wow.
And so I started as a cashier, and I was making a lot less than I was making at the grocery store, but I just thought, well, I'll just work 3 times as many hours. And what I didn't know at the time, because grocery wasn't like this, but Home Depot is very, very male dominated, as you can expect. So, the girls were up front as cashiers, the guys were on the sales floor, the managers were all men. There was no female store managers, no vice presidents, district managers, nothing. And at the time, I didn't know how long it would last. And so I ended up being there for 15 years. I started when they had 12 stores. I left when they had 1,300. Wow, and I started as a cashier and I left as a director. And it was just amazing. It took me all over the country.
Yeah.
I did Alabama and Louisiana, Dallas, Houston, Denver, and back to Arizona, and then out to California, to Orange County and San Diego and Los Angeles. So in that part of it, I moved like 22 times.
That's a lot of moving.
It was a lot of moving, and it was a lot of, I became like the fix-it person. So and I was single at the time and didn't have kids. And so they're like, oh, they literally would call me, and they called me in San Diego in the morning and said, hey, we need you in LA. I literally opened the Chula Vista store in the morning, and I closed the City of Industry store that night.
Gosh.
And they just send for your stuff later. And, it was, the West was still wild at that time.
It's almost like a pro athlete getting traded.
It was crazy. That's exactly what it's like. But, I was very fortunate. I worked for some people that, cared about me. And I worked hard for them, and they gave me some opportunities. So I was the first female store manager and the first female district manager. And again, just with a heavy heart to give it back, right? So I would try to convince people that were applying for a job, you don't have to be a cashier because you're a girl. Yeah. Like, you've done a lot of things. You can be a salesperson. You can be a manager. And just great memories from that. And then on to Best Buy.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because there's a lot there that I think will resonate with people. And Annmarie, by the way, you talk about this like it's just natural. Like this is just the way it goes.
It was my life.
Yeah, but it was. I think I'm going to make a guess at this. It was just the way you knew how to do it.
Exactly.
It was just the way you knew how to work. It was just the way you knew how to do life. It was the way that you just knew how to navigate, even if you didn't know where the next step was going to be. It's like you just pursue it. And it sounds like each time you were really just trying to do the very best job that you could do in that particular job. And then you keep mentioning there's these people that saw you, they invested in you, they poured into you, they recognized what you were doing, they gave you opportunity, they presented you to something new, to something different, and it allowed you to be the first store manager, the first female store manager, and first of other positions. That doesn't just happen.
Right.
And so I want to spend a little bit of time on that, because I really feel like you could have a positive impact on somebody listening today because of that journey. There's going to be somebody that's listening to this going, you know what? I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to not even know where the bills are going to get paid. I know what it feels like to not have a job, to get in my car. By the way, you mentioned the word crazy. That might have been a little bit crazy. You quit one job and you were literally driving around in your car. I hope all of you caught that, by the way. Driving around in your car, couldn't even think to tell your dad that you don't have a job. And so you just drove until you found a Home Depot that had a sign up on plywood that said we're hiring. And so you walk in and go, I'm ready to work.
The craziest part about it is they hired me on the spot.
Yeah.
And because they were behind getting the store open, they said, hey, can you start today? And I was wearing my little bakery uniform from Fry's. And I said, yeah. And they didn't know that I lived 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. And there's like, okay, why don't you go change and come back? I'm like, okay. So I went to Ross, and I think I wrote a hot check for jeans and a polo shirt. Yeah. And I was back within 45 minutes. And I think I figured out how to make the check clear. But
I was gonna say, some of the people listening are either one asking, what's a check?
Yeah, what's a check?
And what does a hot check mean?
Yeah.
So we might have to let them know that that's usually when you would write a check, and then you try to hope you found a way to get the money in your account before the check cashed.
Exactly.
So
and there's ways of, being in
clear.
retail, I can teach them some tricks if they're still writing checks.
Yeah,
but
right.
So I literally went back an hour later, and my first job, this is before UPCs, was to sticker 10,000 tubes of super glue. So they were like in a huge watermelon bin. They're like, hey, the one thing we need done tonight. And I just sat there until I think it was like 1 or 1:30 in the morning, putting tickets on 10,000 tubes of super glue.
How many people would actually do that? But look at what it started.
Yeah.
Look at where it led.
Yep.
Again, being recognized for that. Can I ask you? So I'm going to ask you to do something personal. I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that it'll be all right. We'll find out here in a moment. And it sounds like you talk to Sue on a regular basis.
Yep.
If, let's say, she was sitting right next to you right now, no audience, nobody around, and you just had a moment where you could express to Sue what that time period in your life and her really taking you in and helping you and getting you where you needed to be, providing you opportunity. What would you say to Sue if she was sitting right next to you and you wanted to express some things to her?
Luckily I don't have to guess, because we've had this conversation many times. Yeah. And one of the other things I didn't really talk about, the drinking age in Arizona at the time was 19. And I was, again, 15, but I was working with all 30-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And so, they were taking me to the bars, and the older guys who didn't know I was underage. It was a whole thing. So she not only was a mentor, but she saved my life, literally. She she let everybody know, like, this is, nope, don't be taking her here. Nope, don't be doing that. Nope, no dating.
Yeah.
And so she literally changed my life, and she knows it. And she, just gave me a soft spot to land. I mean, because it could have been completely different. I was leaving that day one way or the other, and I could have easily ended up, doing all kind of crazy stuff. And I didn't know it then, but I mean, God really protected me through that and just put me in a super safe place with, again, I mean, she was a female store manager, and, everybody loved her, and there was other, male managers, and they liked them too, but it was just, she kind of taught me without even realizing, man, you got to go above and beyond. It's not going to be as easy. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. It's just reality. And so as I was promoting other women over the years to manager, whatever, I always would tell them about Sue and just watching her without even know that she's being watched and me not even knowing what I was looking for. But, from a mentor standpoint, from a home standpoint, from advice and wisdom and counsel, I mean, she saved my life and changed my life for sure.
Wow.
I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for Sue.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
And even just sharing in terms of the way that you've been able to carry her impact and acknowledge the influence that she's had in your life, but then carry that on to so many other people. And I know something that's very important to you is networking and connecting others, and the relationships that you build, the people that you surround yourself with, the close knit of your family. And so I want to build into a lot of those areas too. You make this move though, and you've literally moved around a lot with Home Depot, but then you make a decision to go to another retailer from there. So walk us through that decision. And in this case, help us understand what goes into these decisions as you're making them. Now that you've had time to reflect back on that, because now you're on a completely different professional path than even when you were in retail. But when you reflect back to some of these like real key decision points, what went into those decisions? Then if you're like, nothing, I just made the decision and went, then tell us that too.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you a great story. So from Home Depot, they were actually involved in a class action lawsuit. At the time, it was the most expensive one ever paid. I think it still is. And some women in San Francisco sued the company for sexual discrimination, saying they couldn't get promoted, they couldn't get ahead. And at the time, I was the district manager in Denver. And so they're like, hey, you got to come back you have to be in California. You have to help us with this lawsuit, which I did because, of course, I thought it was crazy. And through that, a lot of things came out. Like once it was deemed a class action lawsuit, I had to sit in every deposition. Like there was like 300 of them. Wow. And then the lawyer would ask me a question. And then while the person was sitting there, because they weren't allowed to talk to anybody below the assistant manager level. So it was just, and all the dirt came out. Again, Home Depot was amazing. It gave nothing but opportunities. Everybody there in the early days were millionaires, but it's 100% male dominated. You can imagine the language and the culture was different. Yeah. And, I was with the original founders and, knew them on a first name basis and was, directly involved with them. But
let's face it, it was a lot of contractors. Construction.
It was, my other mentors said that I was raised by truck drivers because of, how that turned out. But, so anyway, at that time, it just was better to leave the company, on good terms. And it was just too hard to, the wives were calling me the night before, like, I know my husband's getting deposed tomorrow. What, you got to tell me if he says anything. I'm like, oh man. So it just was a perfect timing to sail on, and I took a year off, had a blast. I went boogie boarding every day in San Diego, and I called it beach ministry. I just listened to other people's problems, like where they were on their lunch hour or whatever.
I like that, beach ministry.
Oh my gosh,
everybody should be writing that down.
I had a blast, and took a year off, and then went to Best Buy and started as a store manager and did all kinds of things for them, left as a director a little over 10 years later.
Okay.
And that also involved a ton of traveling. I was living in Phoenix, but working in Las Vegas for 2 years solid, Monday through Friday. So I'll give you a minute to think about what living in Vegas Monday through Friday is like after 2 years. Yeah. I have PTSD. I don't know if I can ever go there, except I just went to a concert at the Sphere. So now I'll go back as long as I can go to the Sphere. It was crazy times. And then I got married. Okay. And so I'd been single up till I was 48. And that was one of the things, looking back on it, because I moved so much and it was just really hard to get relationships. And, quite honestly, much of the guys that I dated, I made 10 times more than them. And so they were a little intimidated.
Gotcha.
But anyway, Prince Charming showed up and I wanted to get off the road big time, and Best Buy has a tendency of restructuring every year. We call it March Madness. And so I knew March was coming, and I knew I didn't want to do it anymore. So I got a great severance package, and we took a couple months and had a honeymoon in Costa Rica, had a blast. I took another couple months off, and then I went to Living Spaces, and it just turned out to be the worst job ever. Not the furniture or the people, but everybody above the store manager was tough.
Yeah.
And so I told my husband that morning, like, I can't stay here another day. I just absolutely hate it. And he's like, well, you have to find another job. And I was like, okay. So 45 minutes later, I got called to Denny's, and anybody in retail knows if you get called to breakfast, you're fired. And if you get called to lunch, you're transferred. And if you get called to dinner, you're promoted. So I knew when the call came that early, I'm like, great, today's my last day. And then when she says Denny's, it's a given. So I said, hey, do you want me to bring my stuff? And she said, yeah. I'm like, oh, geez, this really is the last day.
Wow.
And so I literally got fired for saying it's all good in the hood, which I've been saying since I was 18. And so they're like, how you doing? It's all good in the hood. But since the store was in a less desirable neighborhood, they took it to be racist, which was ridiculous. In fact, the guy I said it to, I just hired, and is to this day a good friend of mine, but they turned it into a big thing. And so I literally got fired at 9 a.m, and I started real estate school at noon and never looked back.
Yeah.
It has been amazing.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that too. And so stay in here with us, because there's a few things that I'm going to highlight from what you just shared, and I'm going to see what we draw out from that. And then we're going to go into this real estate journey. And by the way, we can talk about Prince Charming too, if you want to, at 48. And also
he's my ex Prince Charming now, but he's a doll. We're great friends. We golf every week. He's a good guy, just not a good guy for me.
Understandable.
He's a sweetheart.
Annmarie, there is something about you where the view that you take on things, I think, is one of the things that sets you apart. One of the things that makes you unique. One of the things that's been almost like a success habit in your life is the view or the perspective that you put on things that allows you to keep this like forward momentum, this movement forward. Because even the way you describe, the words you use to describe, or the phrases you use to describe certain situations is different. There's a positive hint towards what you're describing, even if it's a negative or challenging situation. Has it always been like that for you, or is that something that's changed in your life or shifted in your life that's kind of
I think it's always been like that. I think, one of my go-to phrases is assume positive intent, right? So, I mean, so many people get just hung up on the silliest stuff, and it's like, really? I mean, you think they really thought that, or, for no other reason they did that? Like, let's assume based on their track record that they were coming from a place of positive intent. Of course, I've been on the receiving end of not so positive intent.
Yeah.
But I think, you can only control what you can control. And I think just you can control your attitude.
Yeah.
You can control your work ethic. You can control being on time, giving it 100%. You can control giving back. When stuff happens to you, you just only can control how you handle it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us too. And I hope all of you are writing that down, because where that started with assuming positive intent, that is empowering.
Right.
It's an empowering mindset to assume positive intent, because like you mentioned, that's something that we can control. We can control our own assumptions that we place into something. And then you went on to share like the things that are within our control, whether it's your work ethic, whether it's your outlook, whether it's how you handle something, whether it's the perspective that you give, your effort. These are things that are within your control. And yet, how often do we run into people where they're trying to put so much time and energy and effort and emotion into things that they have no control over whatsoever? And so let's talk about just what went into deciding to make a wholesale shift. What went into going, you know what, I've had enough retail in my life. Retail has had, at that point, it sounds like 48, 50 years. Well, I guess if you
30,
started at 14, if you started at 14, again, finding a way, right? And experiencing success along the way. You even mentioned there were times where like it was intimidating to some people that you made as much as you did, and yet you allowed yourself to continue down this path and didn't let it slow you down. At least it doesn't appear that way. So let me ask this, before we move into that, are there any things that slowed you down? Are there any things that tried to get in your way? Are there any things that really caused you to almost what most would appear as like a setback, but for you, it really turned into something incredible?
Yeah, I think honestly, again, back to Home Depot, just that it was so male dominated. And I think I was kind of naive because I thought, you work hard, you're going to get the next position. And luckily, the guys that I worked for initially, they ended up being, the president of the company and the president of the West Coast. So, I literally followed them, around the country, and they gave me a chance, and I made sure I didn't blow it, And again, just, if you've got to work extra hard to do something, you got to do it. So I think just not even realizing that, it was disappointing. Like, you didn't get the promotion. And the other part is I was super young. And so I was 21 when I was a store manager.
Wow.
And in those days you went, thanks. And when those days you would go to Atlanta where the corporate headquarters was, and you met with the CEO and the president, and they wanted you to meet the accounting people and the payroll people. And I remember sitting next to the CEO, and he's like, "How old are you?" And I told him, and he literally got up and walked out of the room. And I was like, and there's like 8 other store managers that were there, for their orientation thing. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm just sitting there, I had only been in the company. At that time, I was there almost 5 years, which to that as a veteran, because there's only 12 stores. So I think we had 50 stores, and I became a store manager. So I followed him in his office, and I said, "Bernie, you don't have to worry about me." I said, "I've had the best, teachers this company has to offer."
Yeah.
And he looked at me and says, "I sure enough hope so. You're going to need them." And I was devastated. I'm like, they're going to take this promotion away. Wow. And, it turned out he was just, trying to prepare me for what was coming. And we've ended up great. He just unfortunately recently passed away, but amazing guy. And I think another thing that I learned from people like that, like, he was a cajillionaire, and he was the most humble, down to earth, like you would never know it. Everybody knew because he was on TV all the time.
Yeah.
But just philanthropic. Always giving to charities and, Jewish foundations, and started companies. So like in Israel, just so they could compete, and, Home Depot would buy them. And so again, being surrounded by that kind of culture was just, it just really helped me think, like, doesn't matter how much I make, it's nothing compared to what these guys are. And if they can be humble, like, who am I,
Yeah. What a great lesson to take. And
boy, all of those guys.
I'm going to insert this question because
Sure.
I just got a curiosity to find out how you answer it. What's important about money to you?
Honestly, so it's the resources. What you can do for people. I don't live in a mansion. I don't, I do drive a new Jeep, which I love, miles per gallon, but I'm not into the $400,000 sports cars or whatever, but it's just been giving me the opportunity to help. My mom's 86. She's going to be transitioning soon. I've been able to help and support family members in a bunch of different ways. And so it just gives you the opportunity to honestly to give back, whether it's through, churches or charities or family. And I also think because I've always enjoyed what I did so much, not that it came easy because I worked really hard, but it did kind of come easy because I loved it, though. I've just never had a job with the exception of living spaces that I didn't care for, but, it's just like you work and the money comes. Like, you do what you love and the money follows.
Yeah. I hope all of you have captured that right there, because what you shared is pursuing the things that you love, pursuing the things that you get excited about, pursuing the things that interest you. And then the money comes, the success comes, and it's not without hard work. In fact, the work actually becomes part of the love, because you're enjoying what you're doing and you're willing to put in the extra effort. And guess what? Extra effort leads to success, and success probably leads to better financial resources and promotions. And so just in what you shared right there, there's some really good takeaways, if you will, that I think someone could apply and say, maybe don't choose a career or profession because of the money. Maybe choose it because of the interest and the love and the desire you have for it. And then allow the financial resources to come. But then, like you mentioned, in your perspective, what's important about that is then what you do with it. It's the good that you produce out of those financial resources. If I just give you permission to brag a little bit, and I hope that you'll do that, because you mentioned humility, and I do believe that there's ways to be humble and yet still be encouraging and empowering and inspiring to others through your story and through sharing what those successes have looked like. Would you be bold enough to share what are some of the good things that you've been able to do that 20 years ago you wouldn't have been able to do, and some of that you realize has come because of the financial success that you've experienced? What's the good you've been able to do? Yeah,
probably the most significant. Well, one of the most significant was letting my mom retire. Wow. So she worked at the VA for 25 years. Was an awesome mommy, and still is, and So I think it's been almost 20 years. She just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But she was going to have to pay a bunch of things off before it would be enough with her pension and Social Security and all that. And I said, how much is it? And so she told me, and I paid it off, and was super happy to do it. And it gave her freedom. She ended up going back to work eventually, but not because she had to, because she found something she was passionate about.
That's awesome.
And so just, things like that. We had a unfortunate situation when my dad died very young at 53, and he had 2 young daughters, and they were estranged from their mom, but he had full custody. And so when he died, I got custody of them. But because there was a biological mother in the picture, the courts aren't real quick to give a half sister the full custody over biological mom. So that was a very expensive, long drawn out lawsuit. And in the meantime, Home Depot, again, stepping up, let me transfer. I was living in California at the time. They let me transfer here to Phoenix to deal with it.
Okay.
With the understanding that, you got 1 year, the oldest one was getting ready to be a senior in high school. And they're like, go let her graduate. And the next week, be pre-prepared. We're not paying you California wages to live in Arizona. I said, okay. And that ended up resulting in me getting promoted to district manager. And I opened up all the first Colorado stores.
Yeah. So you become a mom, essentially.
Oh, geez. I mean, I've raised 2 kids with no stretch marks, so.
Wow.
That's not easy.
No, that's not easy. That's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. They're all thriving. One lives in California and is doing amazing, and one lives here in Arizona and doing amazing, and
yeah.
I would do it again.
Thanks for sharing some of these good things that you've been able to do, like with being able to retire your mom, being able to take on becoming a mom for 2 children that are your dad's daughters, that you then get the opportunity to kind of raise towards the end of their high school, graduation, and then send them off. And now look what they're doing. Yeah.
And that's the reason I moved back to Arizona. Was my sister-in-law got killed, and her youngest was 12. And so I got to help with her until she was out of high school. And she's doing amazing now and actually works with me in real estate. So
yeah,
it all, and again, I'm just so blessed to be able to have the resources to do that kind of stuff, and working for companies that, have a heart. That just happened to work out that I got promoted and transferred here to be the district manager for Best Buy. But they knew I was coming here all the time trying to help with this family situation. So when the promotion came up, they're like, okay, you can go.
Yeah. I hope that when you're listening to this, that not only you're taking notes, not only that you're hearing the good that can come from financial success, but that you're already visualizing what would be important for you to be able to accomplish as you experience your own success, because that's where some inspiration comes in from you, Annmarie, is really thinking about what does that vision look like? What does that dream look like of the things that I'd like to do for the people that I love, for the people that I care about? Even if I don't know what all those circumstances are going to look like in the future. You probably didn't predict your dad dying as young as he did. You probably didn't predict, raising 2 girls. You probably didn't predict what happened with your sister. And so those are things that you have to prepare in advance. You have to be ready in advance in order to be in a position where you can help with those things. And it takes planning, it takes commitment, it takes utilizing your resources in a great way. And so as any of you are listening to this, these are the kind of things that you want to realize. We don't always know where life's going to take us, but we can certainly do the preparation for the opportunities that come now. And so help us see, what is real estate meant to you? What is the real estate business meant to you?
It's funny because, again, working in retail, like I get the P&L every month, and I'm just thinking, man, because of doing this or doing that or implementing this or that, it's like I'm making these companies millions of dollars, And for probably the last 3 or 4 years before I left retail, I just kept thinking, man, I just want to own my own business, and I want to be on something like commission based, because I want to speak for myself. If I'm not doing it, I shouldn't get paid. If I'm killing it, I should get, and one of my catchphrases is chubby check. So I got to do what I got to do to get a chubby check. And so I kind of was thinking about it in the background, but again, we call it the golden handcuffs. I mean, retail, a lot of people don't realize it, but if you are a store manager of a regular volume store and you walk out of your driveway and you look to the left and you look to the right, I promise you're making more than anybody on that street.
Yeah.
And then stock options, of course, are always 5 years out before they vest. So whenever you leave, you're leaving more than $1 million on the table. Wow. And life insurance, he gets up to $1.5 million based on your salary. And so it's deceiving because it's nights, it's weekends, it's holidays, it's super hard work. it's a lot of turnover, a lot of management, but it's also very lucrative, or it can be. But I just, at some point I had enough. And so I was not planning on doing quite as quickly until that little incident happened at Living Spaces. But like I said, I was already thinking about it, and I told my husband that morning, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to get into real estate, not realizing that was my last day. And so I literally drove across town, pulled into real estate school, and got my license really quick. And again, was very fortunate to find a mentor. My first company was Remax.
Okay.
And, it just, I've always been a W-2 employee, so it was a big step to go to commission.
I'd say that's quite a change.
It was huge. I mean, it was very scary.
Yeah. And so just so that people understand, that's going from kind of a steady paycheck, or at least one that's been steady for you for many, many years in a W-2, to now saying it's all on me.
A chubby check every other Friday to nothing.
Yeah.
until you have a closing, which, a lot of agents, I mean, I think the statistics are the average one sells 2 houses their first year. I'm like, I wouldn't make it 3 months if I sold 2 houses. So I literally put like 30 grand aside. And I'm like, if I can't make it, and before this 30 grand is gone, I got to go back to retail. And that was enough motivation for me every morning. Like, when it's 115 degrees and you're putting open house signs, oh, well, at least I'm not, at least I'm not running a store today, or I'm not firing somebody today, or I'm not whatever. And so part of it was just owning my own business, and then, having 100% of the responsibility on me. I either do it and make it, or I don't and have to do something else. And, I'm just, again, super fortunate. I just came out of the gates from the beginning, and I think because I was older when I got into it, people just assume because I have sales experience that you've been doing it forever. Yeah. And so the first people to this day do not know they're my first people, and they go, how you been doing this? And I'm like, I've been in sales for 35 years, I didn't say I sold the house, but and again, I had a great broker at Remax that spoon fed me through the contracts and stuff, and would be like, oh, Annmarie's gonna do this, Annmarie's gonna do that. I'm like, Annmarie has no idea what you're talking about, but I'll get there. And so it was just awesome. And I've since moved a few brokerages, and I've been super fortunate to have 2 of my closest family members working with me.
Oh yeah,
my niece and my nephew are on my team, and then we have a very small team of people that just kind of needed to connect with somebody, but don't need like a lot of supervision. And they're all, everybody's doing great. We're very fortunate in this market, in this economy, to be killing it, but they're getting it done.
No, and that is, in fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to share, because whether someone's in real estate or not, I have a feeling your response to this is going to be applicable, whether it's in your home, with your family, with your work, with your business, with your profession. And you think about it is a tough market in real estate. It's a tough market if you're in the mortgage business. So how is it that you and your team are able to still experience the success that you're experiencing even in a tough market?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, so I'm 11, almost 12 years into real estate, and I would say 80% of my clients now are referrals or they're past clients.
Okay.
And so I think, again, you just set the bar from the beginning. So our goal before we meet with them for the first time is thrill them. Like, we want to thrill every client. And during the process, there's obviously some ups and downs. And, when they're super excited about something, like, the appraisal came back or whatever, I'm like, remember, like, a 5-star rating on Yelp, and then and 2 referrals. And they always laugh. And, and then of course, when there's drama going on, I don't mention either one of those. So a lot of his referrals. And I think everyone is like a job interview. Like, I didn't know those first people that I had so far. I've literally sold them 6 houses. They've moved.
Oh yeah.
They've bought and sold 6 houses. And
that story in of itself says a lot.
I know. And again, they don't even know. They'll be at my birthday party next week. I might tell them.
There you go.
But anyway, it's just, and so then of course they tell people, and everybody's different. Real estate's got a million different programs you can buy into, and they'll tell you to time block, and you don't take phone calls from this time to this time. And my guys know, like, you don't do this every day. I'm a total night owl. Like, call me anytime. There's no stupid questions, and I do. Especially with a lot of relocations I do, it's, midnight here.
Yeah.
Or it's 5 a.m. here, and I've got one in Israel right now. It's 2 a.m. here, and they're calling, asking questions and stuff, but you just have to be available. And of course there's a balance, which I've really learned over the last couple of years, how important balance is. But I think it's just going above and beyond every time, Because again, I just put myself in their place. They don't know. I mean, we're whipping around terms like everybody should know, and they're like, "Wait, what's that?" And I mean, when you go to the title company, it's called cash to close. When you bring your down payment, and I literally had one of my best friends go, "Is the bank going to give me that much money?" It was well over $100,000. I'm like, "No, my cash to close, like bring a check." Why do they call it cash to close? I'm like, "Good point.
Yeah.
I'll mention that in the future."
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's just treating people right, and not being afraid to ask for the business and making sure you're earning the business. So there's no, there's just no question that they would use you again. In fact, the stats are on closing day, 95% of clients say they would use their agent again, and then 5 years later, only 5% do.
Really?
Yeah, because you don't stay in touch with them, you don't follow up, you don't, and it's just like a one-hit wonder,
Yeah, that's an amazing statistic, actually. That
crazy.
At closing, they feel like they've had a great experience. Yeah. And then within 5 years, very few are actually using the same agent, the same professional that they used before.
If you haven't kept in touch with them, that's the whole system. Is you got to stay in front of them with magazines, with client appreciation, with their home values. I mean, there's a million ways to do it, but very few do it well, and it's taken me way too long to get consistent at that, but we've been really fortunate.
Well, and even in what you're sharing there, you mentioned it more as like a relationship as opposed to a transaction. And so even where you started with you or your team is thrill them. That's different than customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
That's different than trying to get a score. That's different than just navigating them through the transaction, if you will. Thrill them. Because a thrill, if you're able to thrill someone, that becomes memorable. Right. It becomes something that they remember about that experience. And so even starting there of thrill them, and again, you may not be in real estate as you're listening to this, but I bet you there's a way that you look at an area of your life that you could feel a little wealthier, that you could feel a little more rich in that area of your life if your first start was, what can I do to thrill that person around me? What can I do to thrill the environment around me? What can I do to thrill this experience or event that I'm at? What contribution could I make to enhance the experience? But then you don't stop there. It's not just thrill them in the beginning. You really went on to say, we have to put ourselves in their position, see things from their perspective, even in the words that we use or the way that we describe things, and listen to what they're sharing with us, even on something that's so commonplace in real estate of cash to close. Okay. Doesn't mean everybody's going to understand what that means.
Exactly.
And so there again, you gave us a second nugget: thrill them, create a great experience, then also view it from their perspective. Use a language that they're going to understand when you recognize that maybe there's more for them to learn. Then staying in touch. That communication. What is it that you're going to do between the times that they need you that allow you to stay top of mind? But more than that, you're doing that as a way to create value along the way. And those three things alone, someone could build a model around. They could build a success process, if you were, or an equation to success, just in those three things, Annmarie. And so thank you for sharing those with us. Over and over throughout our conversation already, you've mentioned people. You've mentioned people that have influenced your life, people that have provided opportunities. When you look at the importance of the relationships that you've built, the connections that you made, and even if you would share your term that you've said over and over throughout your life of, I got a guy.
Yeah.
What has the influence of people meant to you? Because I'm going to that because that's something you've mentioned over and over throughout our conversation.
Yeah, I just don't think there's anything more important, whether you're in business or you're a nonprofit. I mean, it's about the people. I mean, there's, stuff is only going to take you so far. And it's kind of like with real estate, and now with Chat GPT and, AI, everybody's like, oh, real estate agents are going to be extinct. And I'm like, they're never going to be belly to belly opening a door. Like a robot's not going to be opening a door going, hey, you said you wanted a swing set with a pool. Look, it's got a swing set with, you know what I mean? And so it's just all about people. And I think the other thing I would say is that you got to meet them where they are. Everybody's not a first time buyer. I mean, I just yesterday moved a CEO into Gilbert from Montana, and I mean, he's just at a completely different level. He's bought hundreds of houses. He's owned hundreds of commercial buildings. So we're clearly not having, conversations about like, hey, we're going to show a cartoon next Thursday. You should come. So you just got to meet people where they're at and, find out what's important to them. And I always ask them, like, if it's a couple, what's the most important thing to you about the house? What's the most important thing to you? And then and then they know you're listening, like when you show it to them, you're like, see, I promised you a 3-car garage, or I promised you it was down the street from the school.
Yeah.
And just, finding out what's important to them, and then being the source of the source, right? So I do a lot of relocations from around the country, and it's kind of weird. I recently did a couple Secret Service people.
Yeah.
And they do it online. They don't even come see the house. And sometimes the husband sees it, but the wife, like, it's crazy because she's moving to this house she's never seen.
Wow.
And so she's like, I'm trusting you. Like, all the women care about is the schools, and all the guys care about is the 3-car garage. And, and so it was really interesting doing it remotely, and everything's done by a code. Like, you don't use their names and stuff. It was very interesting.
I bet it
but
was.
Same, it's just like that's their home, and regardless of how they got there and who paid for it, that's their home. And you got to make sure that, when they come in it, and, I have boxes with my, logo on it, my number, and you just think like, 3 years later, they're getting some out of the garage, and like, oh yeah. And if that's the first time they've thought of me, I'm doing something wrong, and so it's just so nice to be able to, which charter school should we go to? What, do you have a handyman? Do you have a plumber? Where should we get a used car for our new teenager? I mean, it's just a blast to, like, I know you got a guy, and it's all over Facebook. I know you got a guy. And, if I see somebody on Facebook asking for a painter, I, text my painter, I, post my painter, and then of course right after that, oh, thank you so much for the referral. And I mean, I just had the same lenders, the painters, the electrician, the roofers, it's after, one after another, because they know if they ever don't give, world-class service to one of my guys, I'd never use them again.
Yeah.
And if the phone rings, they better answer it.
Well, and there you go. You've given us another formula, even in the way that you describe the way that you work with people. The formula is meet them where they are, find out what's important to them, show them that you've been listening, and then stay in touch. And these seem, again, as we talked about earlier in our conversation, they seem like simple things. But Annmarie, it's what's allowed you to experience what you've experienced, even such unique situations. Tell us, share with us one thing, like what's just one thing that's happened in your life that you would have never imagined happening. Let's say it was back in your retail days. Okay, we won't go all the way back to 14, 15 years old, but let's go back, where you've experienced some success, you're mid-career retail-wise, but what's something that you've experienced in life since then that at that point you would have never even imagined it was possible?
Well, I just got back from a trip of a lifetime from Ireland.
Yeah.
And last year was Spain, both study tours, Italy, which was amazing. And I think it's just, again, it's not, for me, it's just never been about money. I think that it's come, and I'm very fortunate. But it's, they say if you love what you do, you'll never have another job. And I do. I mean, it's just so fun, and it's so different. I mean, no 2 days are the same. People, one of the other tricks in real estate, they're like, oh, write your perfect day down. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It changes 97 times a day. It sounds like a good plan, but it's just, every day is different, and every customer is different. And by doing those things and meeting them where they're at, working hard, going above and beyond, trying to thrill them, it does lead to, some financial gains. And then for me, I mean, it sounds hokey, but I've loved more what I can do for other people. I mean, I can pretty much do what I want when I want, but to be able to, throw a baby shower or throw a birthday party or buy a car or, and then, other things we've been able to do through the church. I mean, it's just, it's so gratifying, and now the big thing is, as I turn 60, it's, the new thing is health is wealth, right? So you can have all the money in the world, but if you're using a walker or, you can't move or you can't drive or you can't get out of the house, and I mean, they say sitting is the new smoking. So, I've got a little work to do, but I'm working on it just to try to, we don't control how many days we have left, but we can certainly control the quality of them.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for being so open with us. Thank you for just sharing some of the things that you've been able to experience, and even just really being, I guess, so giving in just your approach, giving in your approach in this conversation, giving in your approach with others around you, giving in your approach with your family. Thank you for that. And even you mentioned the word hokey. I just want to acknowledge you. It's not. It's really genuine. I can see it in you of how genuine that is, that, when you say it's not about the money, you mean it. And it shows in the things that you've done in your life. It shows in the way you've shown up for people. And granted, you've been able to use your financial success to live that belief out, of these are other things that are so much more important. So let's finish with this question, and it'll be cool to see where it goes.
Okay.
Wealth and abundance are two words that mean lots of different things to different people. And they can mean a lot of different things depending on what you've experienced in life. And so I'm just curious, when you think of where you're at in life today, so maybe not, and if you want to share maybe how you would have defined those in the past versus the way you define them today, I'm totally good with that. In fact, that might be neat to hear if there's been any changes. But when you think about where you're at in life today and someone asks you, like, how would you define wealth and abundance? What would you share with them?
20 years ago, I would have said wealth is the amount in your account, and what your net worth is. And, obviously getting stock options and other things through the years, that's like they heavily concentrate on that, who's got the highest net worth and who's buying crazy stuff and who's selling stock. And so I think to me, wealth used to be a number. And if I get to this number, I've made it. If I get to that number, I've made it. And then I think over the years, for a bunch of different reasons, to me, wealth is, having the resources to do what you want to do. And again, for me, it's just been, it's just a no-brainer. It's like if I can help somebody, whether it's, with knowledge or time or money, I just love to do it. I mean, one of my values to a core is generosity. And I think we've been given a lot, and I think we are asked to, give it away. It's not, just have your hands open if somebody needs it. And of course, every once in a while you get taken advantage of, which you really can't take advantage of if you don't have any, ideas about what's going to happen. But I think now, to me, it's just being able to do what you want to do and who you want to do it for, and where you can actually make a difference. All this stuff is going to rust and go away. Nobody's going to remember what you drove, or I think like when people get fired, the average time is 7 days. 7 days later, their cube is empty, and they're like, "What was that guy's name?" And I think it's I think the only thing you get to leave is your reputation and an impact on the people. And so if you can do that and do it for the right reasons, I don't think there's anything more important.
Yeah. Annmarie, you've left such an impression in our conversation. You left such an impression with each person that's been listening. Thank you so much for this time together. Thank you so much for your openness. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Thank you for sharing the lessons that have been given to you through a variety of mentors. You truly are making an outstanding impression. And I would like to go ahead and invite that if there's anyone that's been listening to this, that if they resonate with your story, if they connect to it, or if they know someone that will resonate or connect, my hope is that our conversation, your sharing of your story, your sharing of your life will turn into impact that goes way beyond anything that you'll ever experience, because it's going to get shared on with someone else, and it's going to resonate with them, or they're going to help someone because of something they heard from you, or they're going to step in for a family member and really do something big and important because of something that you've shared today. And so for any of you that are listening, if you connected in any way with Annmarie's story, my hope is you're going to share it with the people that you love and care about. And as we remind everyone at the finish of every episode that we do, Annmarie, there's so much more to life than money.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Come back for our next episode of the More to Life Than Money podcast. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.